welcome you to the Best Places to Lead show. And I am going to share the story about how 2 weeks ago I made the decision not to do a live show for the first time in almost 6 months. And, I just want to share with you where I went through that journey and then kind of how I got to the other side of it, because I think it's super important that we look at opportunities for all of us to be better together. So, summertime here, I have two kids, 5 and 10, who are active and amazing and rambunctious, just like 5 and 10-year-old kids would be during that time. And what I realized when I made this decision was I was the shoemaker, because for a living, I work with CEOs and high performers. And I was walking barefoot because I was not taking my own advice in the things that I know that are right and good to keep myself mentally healthy and prepared to perform. And so let me walk you through what it's looked like for me in the last 60 days. So some of you may know this, some of you may not, but my wife and I made the decision in October 2020 to sell our home and to travel the country while COVID was happening. We traveled with our two kids. Rachel continued to work. She's a vice president at a pharmaceutical company. And I continued to serve clients from the road. So it was a real juggle, but we got to spend a lot of time with our kids. And I think perspective is the greatest gift that you can give your kids. And so they got to see lots of places around the United States, and that there's not one right or wrong way to do things. And so that to me was super fun and a great gift that we were able to do as a family. In the last 60 days, we settled back down in Jacksonville Beach, Florida, and we bought a house. And so moving back into our house, pulling some stuff out from storage was super cool. Kids were out of school from the summer. Sometimes they were in camp during the summer, and sometimes they were at the house bebopping around. And so, it's great to have them there, but that creates a certain dynamic when you're trying to actually get your work done, where my son wants to get on Minecraft and he's not very patient because he's 5 years old. And I understand that, right? And so all of my clients know both of my kids because they will pop in from time to time. And, that's just the way it is. And so, balancing the home life and the work life is, regularly a challenge. Kids at home add a certain dynamic to that. I had a client in from Vietnam, which was super fun, and got to spend some time with John Cavendish, a great CEO who runs Cellar Candy. Got to take him fishing for the first time ever. And he caught some big fish because he thought we were going to be sitting on a dock like Huckleberry Finn. And we went 10 miles offshore and caught big kingfish. And he said it was one of the most extraordinary experiences of his life. So that was super fun. My wife, being a VP and hospitals opening back up, she has traveled 10 of the last 14 weeks, some portion of the week. And so, I was saying to Roanne and Maria today that I'm a little bit tired because my wife got in at 1 o'clock, and I was trying to be a good steward of a husband and wait up for her, which I was not doing a good job of because I was nodding off. But I, regularly get up between 4 and 5 o'clock, and my first call this morning was at 5:30. And so that's just part of the life that we lead. But it's also the dynamic of, I always call it being a single dad while also managing, the house and a growing company myself. And then we had an extraordinary number of vacations that we committed to. And, woe is me, pity party. It was an extraordinary opportunity for us as a family to travel. But we were in Dale Hollow, Kentucky. I spent 4 days on a houseboat on a lake, which was super interesting. We had to go to St. Kitts, or I should say we had the opportunity to go to St. Kitts because I married one of my best friends and her husband. So on the side, I'm a minister, and I've married, I think that was number 14. I'd have to go back to my books and look. But what we realized was we didn't have our passports. So we had to drive to Orlando. We flew to Buffalo, New York, because it was the only passport office that we could get an appointment at and get our passports the same day. Flew back to Orlando, to Miami, to St. Kitts to go there to be at the wedding, which was awesome, but certainly hectic. Orlando, I guess we had a thing for houseboats this year. We spent 3 days on a houseboat in Orlando on a lake there, Silver Glen Springs. And that was amazing. And then we went to scalloping in Steinhatchee and spent 4 or 5 days over there. And so just an incredible run of travel led me to a place where I wasn't at my best. I hadn't taken care of myself. I had gotten my mindset out of whack. And as I came back from that last trip in Steinhatchee, I recognized that I didn't yet have a guest lined up for the show. And I didn't really have it in me to put together a presentation that would be at the highest level that would be worth anyone's time to come and show up at. And so I value everyone who shows up every week and their time with me. And so I made a decision, which was really hard as a high achiever, because we keep on telling ourselves to go hard and harder and push through things. And I decided to pump the brakes. And so in doing that, I think there's a piece of this which we have to recognize as high achievers, that it is okay to pump the brakes, because the pace of life is dizzying. And so here are the lessons learned that I had in trying to recognize getting to the other side and getting my mental health back. And so when I made that decision to have the grace, I also recognized that there's a difference between reasons and excuses, right? Excuses are known things that are happening and I should have prevented them. Reasons are, geez, my wife's travel schedule has been really hectic. We didn't recognize that that was going to happen when we had scheduled all of the other travel. I didn't recognize that I was going to have 3 new clients and run 2 strategic meetings while I was also in this run of work. And so those were the reasons how I got myself into, central nervous system overload. And what I also recognized was, if I was going to give myself the grace not to do a show, then I also had to take responsibility to make significant changes. Otherwise, I was going to continue down the path of being crispy, near burnt. And so I decided, okay, what do I have available to me to really think about what's going on? Why am I in this state of overwhelm and overload? And what I thought was really fun was the answers were in frameworks that I've actually presented on this show. And so if I go back to episode 5 and I talk about the 9 principles of personal performance, the last principle is refresh and renew. You have to take it seriously to do those things in the short term to get your mindset back into a decent place. And then you have to also be in a place of renewal, which is, what is it that I'm doing to make sure that I am whole as a human being? And so when you are traveling, there are certain things that happen. You lose sight of my morning routine, right? That was a key piece for me that I started to lose sight of. And so you have to do the work to make sure that you refresh and renew. And so I started taking my dog for a walk to create separation. So Banner loves to go on walks. I love to walk them. And I wanted to make sure that I took that moment to say, okay, what am I doing to create refreshing moments for myself? I love to read, but the reality of it is, as I was pursuing some of my objectives, I lost sight of reading. And so I needed to take that and put it back into practice. So in the last 2 weeks, I think I've had 7 or 8 books start showing up back to our new house, which has been great because now I have a daily digest of new things that I'm reading, which is super fun. And so, the second piece of that is renewal, which is really how do I stop my life and get myself back to center? If refreshing is really the whole notion of what's the quick charge to get myself back and ready to go again tomorrow, renewal is the trickle charge that gets you back to 100%. And so, for instance, last weekend, for part of my renewal, I opted out of going to visit with some of our friends. My wife took our 2 kids and they went to the beach and then actually stayed over their house. So I did the sensible thing that any good person would do, was I did 5 loads of laundry and caught us up on all of our laundry. And so it was super great to be here, to be in a quiet, clean space and just be. And sometimes we feel this guilt that we're not doing something or there's not traction forward. And I think the important piece of white space to creating quiet time for that reflection, for the insights that come through, is super, super powerful. And so don't ever feel like you're not doing something, quote unquote, air quotes, not doing something, when you are actually doing the things that you need to do most, which is to put yourself into a state of renewal. The second piece that I really started to look at was the personal pentagon, which I outlined in episode 15. And so what got me really frustrated was, how was I doing on my alignment of my vision, my values, and my objectives? And for me, I was missing on that. And I was really frustrated because I wasn't achieving my own objectives that I had set out. And I learned a really important lesson there, which was I was ending up on other people's agendas. And I thought to myself, if I'm on everyone else's agenda, how am I going to be achieving my own objectives? And so one of the things that I did was this is probably one of the more decisive actions that I took, was making a decision that I was not going to miss out on objectives. I think that's a first step and start. But I used a program called Maelstrom, and it is an inbox organizer for you. And as I went through that, I deleted 32,000 emails that I thought that I would read someday. And if that makes your ears perk up, yes, I am a high learner. I love to read, I love to learn. And so I am a sucker for getting onto people's mailing lists. And so I spent about 6 hours on this tool, just cleaning out my inbox, because I realized that the amount of inbound mail that I was getting, which was at a clip at about 600 a day, was distracting me from the real focus of what it is that I needed to do, which was my own objectives. Not only did I delete 32,000 emails, I also got off over 300 email lists, which was amazing. In the span of about 48 hours, my emails went from about 600 to about 40. And so now the only people that are showing up in my inbox are, people who I know and people who I'm actually interested in and inviting into my inbox. It is an extraordinary tool. It's a tool that I've used in the past, not this aggressively. But it took me about 6 hours to go through that process. And the amount of relief that I have felt since doing that 2 weeks ago is extraordinary. And so one of the things that I would share with you is, are the messages, right? We live in a marketing world now. Are the messages that you are receiving, are they serving you? Are they the ones that you need to hear? Because what I decided was, if I'm pursuing my objectives correctly and I need to go get information, I will go find the information that I need as I go through the process. And so I decided that I would go outbound instead of allowing things to become inbound to me. And that has been a game changer for me. One of the other things that I did was I realized that I was not Pavlov's dog. And so I think we all have one of these, right? If you don't, you're an extraordinary person. I'm holding up my iPhone, and I started to look about how I was using my iPhone. So I went in and started looking at all these whiz bang tools that they have in there. And I was using my phone as a convenience. So I was mindlessly picking up my phone on average 250 times a day, right? You can't be working on your own objective if you're picking up your phone like Pavlov's dog and checking text messages because of the Bing or the notifications. So what I did was I looked, and I have the ability to limit certain apps to certain amounts of time. So Facebook and Instagram got limited to 15 minutes a day, and LinkedIn got limited to 30 minutes a day. I also took this a step further to be even more radical. You can put a passcode. So if you were a parent and you wanted to limit your kids, you could put a passcode on there and then grant them more time if you wanted to. I, on the other hand, closed my eyes and typed in a code. I have no idea what I typed. And so I can't give myself more time on the phone. And that may sound fairly radical, but it has worked for me, because the amount of work that I'm getting done now is I'm focusing in on the right things instead of mindlessly scrolling through Facebook or looking at reels or whatever it may be. I have focused in that it is a tool and not really just a convenience. The second thing that I did was I turned on focus mode full time. And so just because someone texts me and it's convenient for them doesn't mean that it's convenient for me to respond. And so today I had lunch with my friend Kim Bach, who stopped on the way here in Jacksonville on the way back from dropping her daughter off at UF. And while we were there, her phone binged a number of times. And I was telling her the story about turning my focus mode on. And when I picked mine up, I had in the same time gotten 8 text messages. I just didn't know it. And again, it's this whole notion of taking control and conscious intention and stewardship over your time and your energy and protecting it in a place where we are constantly bombarded. And so those were 2 very specific things that I did. If we all think that we are in total control of the stimulus in our lives, I would tell you phones and the apps, by the makers, they are designed to be addictive. And so it is easy to fall prey into this notion of spending 8 hours a day on your phone. Easy to do, right? Especially if you're using it as a business tool. So be mindful. I found that to be really, really helpful. One of the other things that I did was my assistant, Maria, who's on this call, an amazing resource for me. I realized that I was not utilizing Maria to her fullest potential. And so I started putting meetings that we had had previously on the schedule back on the schedule so that I could be held accountable and that I could give her a little bit clearer direction, because she is incredibly capable and could be helping me more if I gave her the clarity of the direction that I needed and needed help. And so we have that back on the calendar, which I'm grateful for. And she's been doing great in helping me get back on tops for the objectives. So look around the room for you, like look around and see who's available to you, because I call it the high achievers trap. We get stuck in this mindset that we have to do all of the doing. And the reality of it is you don't have to do all the doing. You have to be mindfully and thoughtfully resourcing all of the doing. And so keep that in mind. The other thing that I did was, one of the challenges that I have with the show is writing the show description and getting it edited so we can get it over to Roanne and Be the Stage, great partners in the production of this show. And I hired an editor because I wasn't getting to it. And so that was just another mindful thing to say, I'm not doing it, but it has to get done. Let me resource the doing. And so that process is coming together and getting streamlined. So I thought all of those were really kind of fun things. The second thing that I went to in the personal Pentagon is the morning routine. And it's a place that I was really missing. When you get out of sorts, when we were traveling through 2020 and you're changing places every 3 to 5 days, your routine is near impossible to keep up with. And so there were things that fell off my radar. And so going back to the roots of performance, because to me, priming your pump in the morning and having a great morning routine really is the secret sauce of high performers. And I have the great fortune to work with lots of high achievers, and the people who own their morning routine and prime the pump for performance are always the ones who are consistently outperforming in all areas of their life. And so I got back to my roots. And so meditating, I started using the Calm app and just getting myself back to a place of meditation. Prayer goes along with that. I love going to the beach because I live, half a mile from the beach. And that is a place that just makes my heart swell and creates calm space for me. I started at F45, which is a workout concept. I used to go to Orange Theory Fitness and haven't worked out since COVID. So everyone says it's COVID-19. I have proved them wrong. It's actually COVID-20 because I have put 20 pounds on during the process of COVID. And so now I'm back in the space of making sure that I'm working those pounds off. But I also got really intentional about my intentions. So when you've done something for so long, I started blindly saying my intentions without conviction. And I went through the motions of like, did I say my intentions this morning? The first one that I say every morning is I will add an insane amount of joy into the world today. And the reality of it is when you go through the motions, your conscious intention goes away. And so now I am physically reading them off my website. So if you ever want to go read them, you can go to jerrymcnamara.com. You'll see daily intentions as one of the tabs. And if you want to get an inspiration to say your daily intentions, that's how you align the impact that you want to have on the world. And so that to me was really fun. It even led me to a place where I recognized that I had missed the mark with a couple of friends. And I picked up the phone and I called them and I said, I am sorry. I have not been at my best. And I'd like to apologize. And when you get back to that place where it's like, okay, I know that my mental health is super important, and spending time with my vision, my values, and my actions, that's how you unlock that fulfillment. And you miss that mark. It's like, damn, I need to get back to that space of doing it. And so apologizing when you miss the mark, right, is a critical and important piece of making sure that you're living a whole and aligned life. So third piece of the personal Pentagon, my health, right? I looked at my health. Sometimes you have to be ruthless in these assessments. How was my diet? My diet on the road, we traveled a lot for the last 60 days. It hasn't been great. I could either use that as a reason or an excuse. I could do better, right? The excuse is, well, we were on the road. It's hard to eat well on the road. I can do better. And so it's more bringing conscious intention to that. And a great diet always starts at the supermarket. You put the right stuff in your house, it's way easier to eat better stuff. My exercise was non-existent, hence why I've started going to F45, and I will be back there tomorrow. Now that my wife's back in town, I will be there. And again, sleep has always been my superpower. Craig Besky's on the call here live today. He can attest that I can fall asleep anywhere. I once fell asleep during the Eagles-Cowboys halftime show, and that has always been a superpower of mine. So when I assess that, I'm pretty good at sleep and pretty good at maintaining a positive mindset. I think the nature of all the things that I've done over the course of my life to intentionally cultivate a positive mindset, that had stayed pretty well intact. And so I felt pretty good about that. And the last thing to look at when you look at your performance and how we're doing is really the calendar control. And my calendar was insane. And so last Thursday, due to a series of different things, I was on calls from 9 a.m. until 5 p.m. straight. And the types of calls that I do are intentional, focused. It's not I'm just listening in. I am the active participant with one other person on the call at a time. And so there's a level of intensity that goes along with that. And so one of the things that we changed was I went into my Calendly, because people have access to my calendar through Calendly. And I had already blocked out July because I knew our travel schedule was pretty insane. And so I asked Maria to help me, and she went into all of my events on Calendly. And you need at least a minimum of 2 days to get on my calendar. So when you go look, you can't get on my calendar for 2 days. So that creates some consistency for me. And we also created that you needed 15 minutes between bookings. And that became super helpful in all of these. So Carrie Dilly has a question from Facebook, even though he's not here on Zoom. Carrie, you should come over to Zoom so you can join these calls and ask the questions yourself. Exactly what I'm pursuing over the next 10 days is you're experiencing the recharge. What are some of the things that you can do to avoid the urge to check in or give attention to noisy things that distract your recharge? Really great question. One is I'm a big believer of once you have made the decision that you are going to go do something, like I went fairly nuclear. My phone is on focus. And so I don't get any bings or notifications. In fact, one of the things that I didn't talk about was I went in and turned off all of the notifications on my phone. So I get 0 notifications with the exception of Waze, because I want to know if traffic has changed, that we're going to make a turn. And the other one is any of my travel notifications, because if a flight's delayed, I want to know right away. I want to find out later. And so I would encourage you, if you're super serious about this, tell people, right? If you are in my community and I have your cell phone, you're probably getting a text from me at some point in time. I shared to everyone that I was feeling overwhelmed and that I was taking certain actions. And so that generated a level of accountability for me so that other people could support me. And I think that's also a piece that you could pursue as well. But turning down all of the noise and Kiri, I know you're on Teams. I don't know if you need to get all of your notifications turned off, but I would think it would be really hard to sit there and do really focused work when those notifications just keep on popping up in the corner. And it's like, oh, well, what's that one? Oh, squirrel moment. Let's check that one out. And so when you get really focused in on your own objectives and what your own goals are, you get a lot more stuff done. So those are some of the things that I'm thinking about in there. Any questions? Because that was my brain dump. And I think it's really important, really, to know the distinction between, hey, you know what? I'm just feeling a little overwhelmed or a little bit stressed today. And to know that your central nervous system is like, I'm getting fried. I'm not at my best. I'm not doing my best work. And I think in today's environment, we have to make sure that we are giving people all around us grace, because we're living in truly unique times. If you're a leader, if you've been at this at any point in time, we've gone from being in person in offices and seeing people to now we live in a digital world where this is an in-person meeting to some people, right? Zoom can be an in-person meeting. It just happened over Zoom, whereas I don't really consider this an in-person meeting. So the dynamics of how we lead in today's environment have dramatically changed, right? How do you lead hybrid remote teams when you don't necessarily see people? How do you create connection among all of the people in your organization to feel really great about the work that they're doing? It comes back to the 4 C's as a leader. Do people have clarity of what it is that they need to do? Do they feel challenged? Do they feel cared about? Like, how are you making sure that your people feel cared about? And, the last piece is comfortable. Do they have to be comfortable? That, as Captain Rick likes to say, do they have the tools, time, and training to go do the work that you're asking them to do? So that was my journey over the last kind of 2 weeks to get my mind back into a healthy place. And I will tell you, it is amazing what happens when you do focus in and eliminate the noise. The calm, the peacefulness, the ability to focus in has been extraordinary. But it's because I didn't just give myself grace. I decided to take some fairly decisive action and make those changes. I also thought it was kind of fun as I stopped and really considered it was, geez, I already have these frameworks laid out and I teach people these frameworks. And yet, even me, a practitioner who talks about this day in and day out with people, I missed the mark. Let me raise my hand. I missed the mark in making sure that I stayed centered and in a place of high performance. And so I think it's really important to give yourself that grace, but also to take significant action to change your path. Otherwise, you're going to stay in that burnt, crispy state for long periods of time. If anyone has any questions, I'm happy to answer them. And if not, I'm going to tell you about next week's episode, which I'm super pumped about, because my friend Pablo Gonzalez is going to come back. He was on the first show with me, helped us kick off. We're going to do a 6-month review of the Best Places to Lead show. And it has been an extraordinary 6 months. I can't believe it's been 6 months. And I'm going to break down what it's like to actually produce a live show week in and week out, because I will tell you it is work. And I'd love to share those lessons with you. And then I'd also love to share with you, because maybe other than Maria and Roanne, I'm the only one that's been to every single one of these shows. And so I'd love to share with you what I have learned or what has been significantly reinforced for me talking to business leaders of great organizations, practitioners. I think that'll be a really fun show next week. And so I'd really encourage you to come visit. And then the last thing that I want to share with you is we're doing the leadership gap. So I'm a big believer that in order to be a great leader, you have to create a predictable environment by which your people know exactly how you're going to show up, how you make decisions. And the only way you can do that is if you make a deep dive in your own person and do the clarity of your values and how you're going to show up. I know Bill Holmes has been through that course. I know Craig Beskey's been through that course. And so if you're interested, I would tell you, keep your eyes peeled. We'll get a page out with more information about that. But it's an 8-week course that we take people through with real deep reflection to elevate your ability to lead people and better. And that's what it's all about. Friends, my goal was to keep this to 30 minutes this week because Rita, my producer, told me when I do my solo shows, try and keep it to 30 minutes. So I'm grateful that I was somewhere close. I'm a little bit over, but I hope all of you guys have a great Thursday. I appreciate all of you, and we'll see you next week.